אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והיה.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of our reflections on Parshas Tetzaveh. We spoke in part 1 about the notion of Ad, Ayin Dalet, and we explored this and we saw that this has to do with both time and timelessness. That on the one hand it is a stretch in time that goes from here to there. It can also be a stretch in space that goes from here to there. But on the other hand, it's also Shelchen Ad. We say about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, about the Holy One, that he dwells Ad, on high. Also in a time sense, we say Le'olam Vo'ed, same word, Ayin Dalet. In Aramaic, the word Idon means time. In modern Hebrew, Idan means an era or an eon of time. Idan HaKerach means the Ice Age. So we get a little bit of a feeling of what this root Ayin Dalet means. Where do we find this notion for the first time mentioned in the Torah? Think about it. Which word in Bereshit starts with an Ayin and a Dalet? It's the word Eden. Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, the paradise as it is usually translated, has the same two letters Ayin Dalet. And it is in some sense, it's related to what we're talking about in two different senses. In the one sense, it is the meeting place of man with God. It is the first meeting between man and God when, interestingly enough, the voice of Hashem was Mishalech Bagan, was going around. They heard the Kal Hashem Mishalech Bagan. It didn't mean that they met HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, walking through the garden. It's not some commentators, especially non-Jewish commentators, want to see this as a manifestation of the corporal presence of God on the earth, which is of course complete nonsense. It's a mistranslation. They say Kal Hashem Mishalech Bagan. They heard the voice of Hashem going around taking a walk in the garden. The true translation is they heard the Kal Hashem, the voice of Hashem, Mishalech Bagan, going through the garden. The voice of Hashem is the place where man and God meet. Just like between the Cherubim, it is the voice of Hashem, V'dibarti, I will speak, from between the Cherubim. It doesn't mean that God sits there or appears there. This is a notion that doesn't apply to him. It's exactly what Rabbi Dweck was addressing in his talk that I referred to in part 1. How do we relate to a timeless God who is remote from this world, is not even the word, who is simply not part of our world? He, as our sages say, Ein ha'olam mekamo elahu mekamo shel olam. The world is not his place, rather he is the place of the world. He is the one in which all reality is grounded. So therefore, he is not part of that reality. Therefore, in Jewish mysticism, we refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the Holy One, in this, in the language of transcendence. We call him Ein Self, the infinite one. But some even go a step further and they call him Ayin. not being, which is paradoxical because his name, Yud K Vav K, means he was, he is, he will be, and he causes everything to be. But what it actually expresses is that the Creator has nothing in common with his creation. He is not his creation, he is not part of his creation. However, he still meets us. There's still a voice of Hashem heard in this world, and it starts in Gan Eden, the Ayin Dalet of Gan Eden. In that Gan Eden, man encounters God, and it is not going very well. We're not going to go into that today, but I want to refer to the verse in which it described how man left Gan Eden. If you go in your mind and you think of the story, you think that man was exiled from Gan Eden, but that's not how it's introduced in the Torah. In Parshas Bereshis, it says, after the whole episode of the Chet, of the transgression and the judgment over man, then comes the moment that man leaves Gan Eden, and it's described as this: Vayishalchehu Hashem Elokim migan Eden, and Hashem released man from Gan Eden. The word Vayishalchehu is exactly the word that is used when Moshe Rabbeinu approached the Pharaoh of Egypt and said, "Let my people go. Shalach es ami, let my people go." There it means to release my people. Here it also means to release. It doesn't mean to send away. So to send away is lahashliach, but to let go or to set free is l'shaleach. When you set free your eved, your Hebrew slave, it is called a shiluach. It is called the sending away. So here, Vayishalchehu Hashem Elokim migan Eden. For what purpose? La'avod es ha'adoma asher lukach mishom, to work the ground from which he was taken. Then in the next pasuk it says, Vayigorish es ha'odom vayashkein mikedem legan Eden es ha'kruvim ve'es lahat ha'cheref ha'mishapeches lishmar es derech eitz ha'chayim. Then God banished man. It doesn't say he banished him from Gan Eden. He said he banished him, and he caused two Kruvim to dwell at the entrance to the east of Gan Eden, to the entrance to guard the way to the Eitz HaChayim. It's interesting that we heard first the voice of God speaking to man in Gan Eden, Kol Hashem mishalech bagan, followed by two Kruvim to guard the access to this situation of Gan Eden. And in our Sedre, we have the exact reverse. We have two Kruvim that are on top of the Oram, and then God speaks from between those Kruvim. We have a reversal. The two Kruvim at the entrance of Gan Eden are there to protect the way to the Eitz Chaim so that man cannot get to it. And the two Kruvim on the Oram are there to guard the access to the Eitz Chaim, namely the Torah, the Luchas HaBris that are inside the Oram. As the Torah is called Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim bo. It is a tree of life. The Torah is a tree of life. That's why in many synagogues the paroches that hangs in front of the Oram, in front of the cupboard where we keep the Torah scrolls, has very often a depiction of a tree, the Eitz HaChayim, the tree of life. How do you meet somebody in time? What is the v'no'adati lohem? How do you arrange a meeting in time? It comes through interaction. if you think about it very, very carefully, then you know that the entire passage of time is because events take place. If events would not take place, then there would be no notion of time. Every way that mankind knows how to keep track of time has to do with events. We measure a day by sunrise and sunset. We measure a year by the course that the sun takes in the sky. We measure a month by the movement of the moon. One physicist once said, don't think that time exists by itself. Time is not that what remains when nothing else happens. That is an entirely wrong understanding of time. Time is when things do happen. And this explains the gap between we who exist in time and HaKadosh Baruch Hu who exists outside time. Why is that so? Because he is unchanging. Nothing changes about him. He is the same yesterday, the same today, the same tomorrow. That is Hoyer Haue V'yiyeh. He is the unchanging one. How then can we meet him when meeting in time means by definition if going from here until there, until you meet somebody? A meeting implies a movement of two people towards each other, or a movement from one person to another person. That's when you meet. Meeting up means, it's in Hebrew, it's a pegisha. It's almost, you bump into each other, right? So how is this with God? How can such a thing be? And the answer, of course, is he, in some miraculous way, meets us by his actions. Although he, get your head around this, he doesn't act. He doesn't act. He doesn't do. But he encounters us through his actions. This is paradoxical. How can an unchanging God act as if he is changing? It can only be because he actually hides his true nature from us and comes to us in a kind of a filtered fashion, a kind of if we would be confronted with the true essence of our Maker, we would immediately cease to be. There wouldn't be any place for us even to exist, because we exist by definition by change. Our whole mahus, we say in Hebrew, our whole quality of being is by changing constantly. That's what you do with your body. That's what metabolism means. Metabolism means that you change substances from one to the other and somehow get your life force out of that. Life is change, and therefore anybody who is stagnant, anybody who doesn't change, is half dead. If psychologically or spiritually you're standing still, you're in a dying process. You're about to die. We only exist through change. And he doesn't. So where do the two meet? It's because he hides himself from us. He hides his true being from us and says, all right, boys, I will, in big scare quotes, come down to your level. I will, Rabbi Dreck in his talk talks about this. He says, when the Rambam says God doesn't have eyes, he doesn't have ears, he doesn't have a mouth, he doesn't have legs, he doesn't have arms. So why does the Torah speaks about God's hands and God's eyes and God's feet and God's arm? Why? Because he gives us permission to think about him in these terms. As long as we remember, he isn't that. He isn't that. He gives us the wherewithal. The whole Mishkan is an expression of that. With all the symbols that are in the Mishkan, a table to eat and a lamp and a seat, a chair. The whole Mishkan is actually, our Chaim HaKadosh says the Mishkan is a symbolic expression of the human body, right? And that is therefore the place where you can meet God, because he allows us to think about him in terms of what he is absolutely not himself. But he says, if you want to have a relationship with me, I need to allow you to not think correctly about me. This sounds daring, it sounds absurd, but there is a truth to this. Every revelation is by its nature a concealment of something. Let me give you an example. If you want to look at the sun, you better don't stare in the sun. That's a bad idea, you'll go blind. What you do is you take a smoked piece of glass and you look through it. That piece of glass filters away 95% of the sunlight, but the 5% of the sunlight that it lets through will reveal to you all kinds of things that you could not see in the glaring light of the sun. It will be drowned out by the light. For example, the sunspots, the sun is full with spots, you can see when you filter out most of the sunlight. Likewise, when a beam of sunlight enters through your window, you see a manifestation of the sun. It is the same light. However, it is filtered and is now beneficial. This is, of course, what the Torah tells us. Lo yirani ha'odom v'chai. Man cannot see me and live. The two are not compatible with each other. Our sages tell us that at the time of the revelation of Har Sinai, the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, died on the spot and they had to be revived. The Malachim had to come and pour dew on them and resuscitation. What's being expressed here is that the encounter, the raw encounter with God, is unthinkable. It cannot happen. However, in his great mercy, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given over to us a world of illusion, Olam HaDimyan. This can be understood in two different ways. The Olam HaDimyan, the world of imagination, or the imaginary world, you can think of it as the world that misleads, that hides the true nature of reality. On the other hand, you can also think about the same expression as the world of parable, of dimayon, of likening one thing to another. And if you think about it, the whole way in which we understand the world is always by ways of metaphors and comparisons. We speak about, in our Jewish world, we speak about Or HaTorah, the light of Torah. We don't mean that when you take out a Sefer Torah that it lights up in the dark. That's not what we mean. We use the word light as a metaphor, but we don't have even a better word to talk about it. The whole of the Chochmas HaNistar, the whole of Jewish mysticism, is full with expressions that cannot be taken literally. Not because there are better expressions that are more literal. No, it means that there is no other way of talking about it. There is also no other way of relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the maker of the world, than by the encounters that he gives to us to meet him. And that is v'no'adati lohem. I will make an appointment to meet them. Meaning, I am the one who creates the possibility of this encounter. Would I not have done that? You would have been a one cellular type of bacterium or something like that, without consciousness, without a relationship with his maker. For the mere fact that you seek HaKadosh Baruch Hu means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given to you the opportunity to meet him. That is actually truly what is meant by B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. It's not in the image of God that that when you look in the mirror you see some kind of image of God. This is not the case. Tselem, Tseil means a shadow, and the Tselem Elohim is the shadow of God. A shadow is exactly not the object that casts the shadow. It is the impression that the shadow leaves of the presence of Hashem. It goes even further. In Jewish mysticism, we speak about the tzimtzum, the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has somehow limited his Ein Sofius, his infinity, by creating a place for us, or in order to create a place for us. This doesn't mean in any way, shape, or form that HaKadosh Baruch Hu kind of lowers himself, his atzmus, his own essential being. It is, we relate to the world around us as a dimion, as a metaphor for the true underlying reality, because we do not have access to that true underlying reality. We can only, if you think about it, every encounter that you have in your life is of this nature. If you meet somebody, you are not meeting that person, who that person is in its innermost being. You will never know that, not even of your own wife, and as I said in the previous talk, not even about yourself. The only way in which you relate is to probe, to encounter. In physics, they do it by taking a huge particle accelerator and smashing subatomic particles into each other. What are they doing? Why don't they take a proton and actually look at the proton and just see what it is? The truth is, you can't see it. You have to interact. You have to see how it interacts with other things. Then you will get an idea, but no more than an idea. No more than a dimion, no more than a comparison, a metaphor for what it actually is. Up to such an extent that today physicists don't even talk about the reality of these objects. They only talk about it in as far as they can say anything about the interaction between entities. And this is the same with our encounter with God. We encounter him by having meetings with him, by interacting with him, by experiencing how he treats us, what he does. We call this, I see the hand of God, right? Or you come in, you say, unbelievable, Hashgacha Pratis today, what happened to me here, there, and the other. What we often do not realize is that our whole life consists of the things that happen to us without us actually knowing what in reality is going on. Soon we will read the Megillah. The Megillah is the revelation to us of what is hidden, what we do not see. The name of God is not mentioned in the Megillah, and the entire name of the book is very strange. It's Megillas Esther. Megillah means to reveal, right? Gilui means revelation. And Hester means hiddenness, means concealment. So the name of the Megillah itself is a paradox. It is the revealing through hiding. It is seeing through not seeing. This is what we physically do when we squint our eyes. When you want to see something really, really well, you have to see far less of it than what you would do when your eyes are open. If you ever go to an eye doctor and he tests you and he puts eye drops in your eye, and they are a kind of substance that enlarges your pupils and your eyes are open. Now you go outside after the appointment and you can't see a thing. You see far too much to be able to see. To see is to conceal. Now, is this a human condition that will forever last, that will never ever change? Let's listen to what the prophet Isaiah, Yeshayahu HaNovi, says about this in chapter 51. He says, V'habitu, and look upon, El Avrom avichem ve'al Soro mechalelchem. Look on Avrom, your father, and Soro, who bore you, ki echot krosiv va'avorchehu va'arbehu. Because he was a single one. He was a unique, solitary individual when I called him. And I blessed him and I made him many. In other words, it started with one man, Avram, who recognized that the bridge between heaven and earth that the gap between heaven and earth could be bridged, who was the first one to call God not just the God of heaven, but the God of heaven and the earth. This was unique about Avram, not that he recognized that there was one God. Believe you me, everybody in the world deep inside knows that there is one God and no other. That is not the essence of what Avram brought to the world. It's not that he was the first monotheist. It's nonsense. You think Noah was not a monotheist, and Shem and Eva and Methuselah and Chanoch, they were obviously people who knew that there is one God. What he brought into the world is to open the eyes of people to the possibility of actually meeting God, actually having God involved in the life between people, in relationships, in encounters. Habitu el Avrom avichem el Sorom techalelchem, ki echot krosiv va'avorchehu va'arbehu. Then comes the next pasuk, which you all know because you say it every Motzei Shabbos, but you probably never saw it in context. Ki nicham Hashem Tzion, nicham es chavaseha, vayosem midbaro ke'eden, va'avoso kegan Hashem, sosan v'simchu yimotzei bo, taudo v'kal zimlo. Because Hashem has consoled Tzion, and he has consoled its ruins. In other words, the vision of Torah being in the world and a place for God to dwell, which was, of course, the Beis HaMikdash in Jerusalem, is not lost forever. On the contrary, it will be restored. Vayosem midboro k'Eden, and he will make its midbar. It doesn't mean the midbar in the desert. It means the spiritual midbar, the spiritual wilderness. He will make it like Eden. He will make it like this place of the Ayin Dalet, of the encounter, where mankind started with hearing the voice of God going around in the garden. Kegan Hashem, it says it openly. It is the return to Gan Eden. But now, not by trying to go back and beat these Cherubim out of the way who guard the way to the Eitz HaChaim in Gan Eden, but on the contrary, to go forward and find the Cherubim on the Oran and follow what the Eitz HaChaim, to be a machazik Eitz HaChaim. Eitz HaChaim il a machazikibot, to those who hold fast to it. So shall the Simcha Timot say. Well, then rejoicing and joy, always difficult to translate these words, will be found in Tzion, Todo v'kal zimro. So, that's the story of the Oran and its house, and the meeting place between the Cherubim. Lest we concentrate our mind on the outward manifestation, the material thing. The Oran was made out of atzei shittim, of acacia wood, and it was gold. It's all material stuff. We have a very interesting pasuk in Yirmiyahu. It says a very, very strange thing. It says that it speaks about the Messianic times, right? It speaks about the ideal future. Ki sirbu ufrisem, when you will become many and you will blossom ba'oretz in the land. Bayom hema, in those days, Neum Hashem, says Hashem, lo yomru od. Pay attention to the words. Lo yomru od, Ayin of Dalet. They will not say still, Aaron Bris Hashem. They will not speak about the Aaron Bris Hashem. Ve'lau ya'alei alev, and it will not even enter their mind. Ve'lau yizkru vo, and they will not talk about it. Ve'lau yifkaudu, and they will not pay attention to it. Ve'lau ye'oseng naut, and it will not be made out again, or still. Because what? Vo'esahi, in those days, Yikru Yerushalayim, they will call Yerushalayim Kisei Hashem, the seat of Hashem. When Hashem's presence is not in a symbolic place on the Olam, no, Hashem's presence will be in Yerushalayim, in a living, breathing city, in the commerce of people together, in the encounter of people with one another. V'nikvu eleha, and then will gather to it, kol hagoyim, then all the nations will go there, l'shem Hashem liYerushalayim, to the name of Hashem, or the presence of Hashem in Yerushalayim. V'lo yelchu od, again this word od, achrei serirus libom hora, and they will not go after the evil, how do we say this, the evil ideas of their heart. Evil doesn't mean here dark, satanic, Lord Voldemort type of evil. It means that which has no permanence in this world, that which is transient, that which will not last. What will last ultimately in this world is the presence of God in a world that finally lives according to the directions of use of its maker. I wish you could Shabbos.
והוא היה, והוא עובר, והוא עובר, והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציא נברא לעת נשא בחפץ הכל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובר והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציא נברא לעת נשא בחפץ הכל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובר בתפארה והוא עובר והוא יהיה בתפארה.